Let's now shift our focus over to Egypt now, which is clamping down on rare protests. The government has launched a crackdown which human rights groups say is one of the worst during Abd El-Fattah al-Sisi's 5-year presidency. But the question that cannot be brushed aside is this: by suppressing dissent and crushing protests, is Egypt going back to the dark path that the country treaded on during 2013? Let's find out in our next report. This is human rights activist Alaa Abd El-Fattah. Little did Alaa realize that freedom in Egypt comes with a heavy cost. The man is now under arrest, slapped, stripped and beaten. Egypt's recent crackdown has targeted some of the government's most prominent critics, including Alaa and Isra Abd El-Fattah. The two are not related, but Isra is credited with being an iconic leader of the 2011 revolution. The arrest comes as the government of President Abd El-Fattah al-Sisi is facing the largest public demonstration of discontent in years. Both face physical abuse, and their plight has already been made public on social media. Egypt's 2011 uprising saw massive crowds protesting the dictatorship of President Hosni Mubarak, ultimately leading to his ouster. But the new government passed a law banning unauthorized protests, and since then, very few demonstrations have taken place. The current protests were fueled by viral videos published accusing the government of corruption and misuse of public funds on luxury palaces. And so, the protests began on September 20th. Several arrests, including of prominent political scientists and politicians, have been released. But some, like Isra and Alaa, remain in detention. Officials have conceded that at least 1,000 people have been questioned, but several Egyptian human rights groups maintain that 3,000 people have been arrested.
This is an image being painted as was done before, comprised of lies and defamation, and some media working to present an image that isn't true. We are really strong. The country is really strong with you. Why? Because of God and because of you.
Is Egypt again on a dark path where rights and freedoms are under attack? Bureau Report, Wion, World is One. Let's now bring you news from India, as its apex court will today conclude hearing in the Ayodhya case. A 5-judge constitution bench headed by Chief Justice Ranjan Gogoi has been hearing the case for 39 days now. It had earlier set the deadline to finish arguments on October 18th, but bringing forward the deadline, Supreme Court asked the parties to wrap up their arguments by today. The judgment will be reserved by the bench if the arguments conclude. The bench will pronounce the ruling by November 17th, as the CJI will retire on that date. If the judgment is not delivered before his retirement, the entire matter would have to be heard afresh. The case pertains to hearing appeals against the September 2010 verdict of the Allahabad High Court. The High Court had divided the disputed 2.77 acres of land equally among the Nirmohi Akhada, the Sunni Central Waqf Board and the Ramlalla Virajman. The bid to arrive at a negotiated settlement to the dispute via a mediation process failed after Ramlalla said no to further mediation, and days later the side arguing for the mosque also turned down an invitation by the Supreme Court appointed mediators.